Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're at the bottom of page 1388. Aleph Shin Pei Ches. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. The pages in the original Hebrew. So, we've now entered into the zone, so to speak, of the second level after speaking about Talmud, which relates to Beriyah and is the process like the moonlight in the darkness. Machshakim hashivani zu Talmud shel Bava, zu Talmud Bavli. That Talmud Bavli is compared to sitting in darkness because relative to the time of the Mishnah, the time of the temple, the time of the Mishnah, I should say, and before that, all the way back to Moshe, it was not considered darkness from a spiritual point of view because it was the divine clarity within the Torah. But then entering the next stage in history became a darker state, and the discovery through the exertion and the effort like caused by Koyach Atzmai, the effort from below of the Talmudic sages to achieve clarity, that is Talmud in Beriyah. Mishnah, as I just said, has a clarity to it. So there's a revelation, so that's compared more to the bright stone. The luminous stone absorbs and retains and assumes and acquires the properties of the sun or the moon or the stars. And that is reflective of the Mishnah because the Mishnah has a radiant side to it because the Torah, the written Torah and the Torah given from above compared to sunlight is shining in it. That's what we began discussing. So essentially, this is the difference between Yetzirah and Beriyah Cheshach. That the world of Yetzirah is the world where Mishnah manifests, and that originates in Chagas of Atzilus. Chagas is more of a revealed state than Chabad. Chabad, as we discussed, is when a person is using their mind, it's far more introverted experience. It's you and you alone. You can't have a relationship while you're contemplating or you're concentrating on something. Midas, by definition, Chagas, Midas means a relationship with another. So what does that reflect on in the divine attributes? That Chabad reflects on the divine as it is inward. And the Midas, Chagas, Mishnah, reflects the divine as it's relating to another. So there's a revelatory side to it, whereas Chabad remains fundamentally concealed. But as we discussed, there's the Chabad that comes through the effort of the sages, but on its own, it remains concealed. That's why Mikra, which is rooted in Chabad as well, is fundamentally stories form. You don't see the brilliance in it until either you have the clarity from above, like in Mishnah, or from below through the efforts of the Talmudic sages. So as such, Chagas, that's just Yochel is b'bchinas Gili. And he gave the example, like we see, the greater the light, you cannot look at it straight. If it's a great, powerful light, meaning coming from Chabad, that's why it's in a state of Cheshach. Because he asked the question, the Beriyah is higher than Yetzirah. He said, Haloi, Beriyah l'mayla mi Yetzirah. So how do you call Beriyah Cheshach, darkness, and Yetzirah light, Gili? So he said, he and his senes. It's interdependent exactly on that, because the higher the revelation is, the more shades you need to be able to contain it. But you could see it. If it's not such a powerful light, you can look at it through a transparent glass. So Yetzirah has the quality, and that's the Maila, he said, so I discussed yesterday when we talked about there are two options. You can have an experience, you can access a higher level, but you can't see it directly. Or you can see something directly as if you're meeting it face to face, but it's not going to be such a high level. So it's not really a matter of a multiple choice of choosing which one. Each one has something that the other doesn't have. As we discussed, the process of growth is that first you understand something from a distance, so to speak. You know it exists, but you don't really understand its muhus, its personality. It's not like you see it, like the example of difference between zeh and hu. When you say something is zeh, zois, meaning you're seeing it with your own eyes. Initially, we don't begin by seeing with our own eyes. Then as we grow, we begin to appreciate and we can begin to relate to something in a very, like in a first person or second person way. And then new levels are revealed, and those levels remain somewhat in the distance, meaning that we know it exists, but we don't yet fully see it face to face. So the Maila, the quality of Beriyah is that it's a higher level, but it's concealed. Yetzirah is a lower level, but it's revealed. And revelation has a tremendous power, as we're going to be learning in the next few pages, because the ultimate purpose of existence is not just to experience godliness in a concealed way. It would be like saying that somebody is a good person at heart. That be'etzem, you have a soul that's connected to God, but it's not expressed in any fashion. We know that in this world, things need to be expressed. To say, I don't have to tell you I love you because everybody knows it. No, we need in this world, there needs to be expression and revelation. So revelation has its limits because the fact that it's revealed means it's not as profound level as it is when it's concealed. But the quality it has is that we can experience it. And that's a critical piece in the whole puzzle. And that's why having clarity and revelation has also its qualities. It's true that through darkness you can reach and access a higher level of the superconscious, but revelation is equally important, and that's why Yetzirah has that prominent role, the role of like the luminous stone. It's a revealed state, and it's absorbing and expressing. It's reflecting, I should say, its source, which is in this case the Torah that is shining with clarity in the mission. He's now not using the word mission, he's talking about Beriyah Yetzirah, but now he's going to go into a deeper, or I'd say more elaborate discussion of the difference between Beriyah and Yetzirah. And this too is not very common in Chassidus. You have, obviously, there's plenty of references to these worlds, Atzilus, Beriyah, Yetzirah, but he's going to actually break down what is the difference between Beriyah and Yetzirah. Based on this prayer, based on this verse of this prayer, that light is associated with Yetzirah, even though it's a lower world, and Cheshach is associated with Beriyah, even though it's a higher world, as we just discussed. And ultimately, the learning of Torah, as we discussed, is the interface. You really want to have both. You want to have the etzem begila. You want to have that which is beyond expression expressed. So, like, just to use a simple example, when people have communication, we all know liba lepuma legalia. There's an expression. A person cannot fully express with their lips what's in your heart. You know, ever hear somebody say to you, I don't have adequate words to express myself, my appreciation, my love, my care. Why? Because words are limited containers. So there's definitely a part of us that we can't fully express in a revealed way. The deeper you go into the human soul, the less words we have. As I've explained many times, that the interesting paradox is that when you talk about things that don't have much quality, for example, talk about the weather, sports, things that don't really have a real gravity or meaning, you can talk about it forever. When someone asks you to talk about yourself, your innermost intimate self, you don't have many words. And not because you don't want to reveal, because you have your defenses up and you don't want to share. Even for yourself, it's hard to express some of the deepest feelings we have. And the deeper you go, the less expression there is. So it's a form of cheshach, in a sense. Not cheshach in the conventional sense, darkness as a negative darkness, darkness as an above revelation, not below revelation. So that's why we seek other ways of expression. For example, metaphor, poetry, song. That can contain deeper feelings because it's not as clear, it's not as revealed. It has a certain element that is still cryptic. And the deeper you go, when you want to express even deeper feelings, even that is not enough. That's why sometimes just a laugh, a cry, oy vey, can express more than entire volumes. Because the more there is, the less keli there is. Keli is expression and revelation. Is the etzem feeling or thought. To the point that the Zohar says that there's a kol delay shtama. There's a voice that can't even be heard. So when we blow shofar, for example, we sound the shofar, there's the three different sounds. Then there's a sound that can't even be heard. It's so profound, it only expresses itself in silence. And that's why silence has more power than sound. For example, the Kohanim who served in the temple in silence, considered to be a higher level than the Levim, the Levites, who served with song. Even though you think, 1 second, song is such a powerful expression, it is. But it still has some definition, some form of expression. So in a sense, the deeper you go, paradoxically, the more concealed it is. The more revealed it is, means it's at not such a high, deeper level. But the truth is, we want the combination of best of both worlds. We want to express the inexpressible. So ultimately, learning Torah, as we shall learn, and if we don't learn, we'll discuss it, is really bringing the essential elements, that the essence of the divine, but in words and expressions that are revealed. So essentially, like a combination of Beriyah Cheshach, Yetzirah, and Beriyah Cheshach combined. But right now, we're still talking about them as two separate levels, with Beriyah being Cheshach and Yetzirah being I wanted to also add something I think we said. I don't remember. I think I said it after the class, just after the recording. I said, please remind me. I'm trying to remember what I said. I thought it was important to put on the record. Maybe I was talking the difference between revelation and clarity. That revelation is from above and clarity that we achieve from below. So there's a clarity that comes from above and there's a clarity that we achieve through our efforts. I think I discussed that. I'm not sure. Does anybody remember what I said at the end of after the recording? I definitely want to add it to here. Maybe it's that. Maybe I mentioned it already. I'm not sure.
I think it was that, but it was this woman Robin's question that maybe she can remember.
Yeah, but I remember I gave an example that I thought was a very good example to explain this. Okay, it'll probably come to me.
I think it was with a 5-year-old when you're saying something, explaining something to a 5-year-old. I'm sorry. I mean that was sort of the sense of it. That
no, I remember. I think that analogy I gave earlier, but that was the analogy that a teacher who can explain something to colleagues that are on the same level, that's one level. But if you can bring it to a level where a child who doesn't have any real full understanding and still some way give them a taste of it, an experience, means that you're coming from a deeper place. So in other words, the fact that you can come to, but I think that was what I said earlier. Okay, fine. It'll come to me if it's that relevant. It'll come to me. So we'll continue reading now from 4 lines from the bottom of the page, 1388, where he continues the discussion of Beriyah and Yetzirah in this context of Choshech and Or. So he says like this: Beriyah Eitz Chaim, Shar HaKrishma Perek Aleph. So Beriyah Eitz Chaim is one of the works of the writings of the Arizal, it's called, that Rab Chaim Vital documented and actually committed to writing. He was the primary student of the Arizal. Beriyah Eitz Chaim is one of the books. There's Eitz Chaim, there's many books of the Arizal. So Shara Krishma, Beriyah Eitz Chaim is very much around the prayers and around mitzvahs. So he says, Perek Aleph, chapter 1, it says like this: Bekavonis Yetzirah Beriyah Cheshach. So Yetzirah Beriyah Cheshach we say every evening in the prayer service, in the Ma'ariv. So he says in the kavanah of this prayer, Yetzirah, that you've shaped light and you created darkness. He says like Kosav, he writes, La'elam, a rule. La'elam means always. Oyed is Tzureh, v'cheshach nukva. That light is masculine and darkness is feminine. Now again, let's make this clear. The darkness here does not mean what we say, the darkness, the double darkness of Golus, the darkness of oppression and affliction and so on. We're not talking here darkness in the context of a negative darkness. Here we're talking about darkness as concealment. So he says a rule. La'elam, Tzureh. Tzureh is Aramaic for Zohar, masculine, and Cheshach is Nukva. So basically, Yetzirah, which means shaped light, is a masculine form of expression, and Cheshach, Beriyah Cheshach, is a higher level, is the level of Nukva, of the feminine. I just want to see if he's going to explain it. If not, let me explain it. Ulechein, v'hine, rather. V'hine, Beriyah, hi b'chinas Nukva, lechein ksiv b'cheshach. Since Beriyah is the level of a feminine level, that's why about Beriyah Cheshach. You refer to it as a concealment. The Yetzirah Tzureh ksiv be'er. And Yetzirah, which is the level of Zachar, of masculine, that's where you write the word Er. That's what it says in Pri Etz Chaim.
So Nukva is from a higher world, in other words.
Well, Beriyah is higher than Yetzirah. So let me just see what he's going to say about explanation-wise. Let me explain this in terms of Chassidus Chabad before we read on. He's going to elaborate more on this with different sources. Now, what does this mean? So first of all, let's make one thing clear. When it talks about masculine and feminine in Kabbalah and Chassidus, it doesn't mean the person, a man and a woman that you may know yourself. It means the archetype, the feminine archetype and the masculine archetype. That God created two forms of energy. So before the human being was created, before Adam and Eve were created, male and female, in the divine image, as the Torah tells us, right, the beginning in Bereshit, in Genesis, these two energies existed on higher levels, spiritual levels. So you face the Zah and Malchus, for example. Zah, the middays of Atzilus, is considered to be masculine. Malchus is feminine. We say Kutsha Brichu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is masculine. Shechina is feminine. The 6 days of the week, masculine. Shabbos, Malchus, the queen. Shabbos, queen. So you have levels in the spiritual cosmic levels, a masculine energy and a feminine energy. Where do they originate from? They originate two forms of divine expression. I'm just going to use my terminology, actually, in the book, in my book, Torah Meaningful Life, in the chapter on men and women, women and men, I explain it there in very simple English. That basically these two archetypes, these two forms of energy, one is, we'll call it intimate energy, and one is called expressive energy. So we all have both. Every human being, male and female, has both. I mentioned before, there are things that we carry very deep inside our hearts that we don't even have ways to express altogether. To the point sometimes we can't even express it to ourselves. It's so intimate. So you say, Kfud de bas melech pnima, that the glory, the honor of the princess is pnima, is internal, is within. Essentially, the concept of tznius, of modesty, is really a form of a deeper inner dignity. Dignity does not have to be worn on the sleeve. Dignity is something that you exude from within and you just sense it. It has a certain mystique to it. Masculine energy is the divine energy that's expressive, the one that expresses itself, the power to create, the power to conquer, the warrior. So sometimes soul, which neshama is in the feminine, neshama is lashon nekeva, because the neshama is more of an internal energy. Body, guf, is more of an expressive, so like Ur and Keli in a certain way. But in Ur itself, it's two levels of Ur. Chassidus explains is the divine energy that God emanates. That's an energy that only is for himself, like he in his own inner sanctum. And then there's the divine energy that God uses to act, to relate to, and associate and envision another being, another entity, existence. And you really want both, and you need both. One expresses more the inner dimensions of the divine, and one creates what the kavanah, the intention, and you need both. Now, ultimately, when that evolves, it evolves into the masculine personality and the feminine personality. Well, let's, again, remember, every masculine energy also has some feminine energy in it. Malchus exists also in Zah. There's a Malchus in every sphere. And there's a Zah in Malchus. So there's a masculine dimension also in the feminine. So that's why it's not mutually exclusive. But in the archetype level, we call one a feminine energy and one is a masculine energy. So that makes sense now. Yetzirah, because it's revelatory, it's revealing. The revealing part is a masculine element. And the concealing part, that which is concealed, cheshach, is Beriyah, relates more to the feminine dimension. That's a brief explanation on this. And then he continues. Let's continue reading. And look there, delve there into the beginning of the chapter. Where's there? In Pri Etz Chaim, chapter 1 of Shar Krishma. B'shem Sefer Hadrushim. That he quotes there from the name Sefer Hadrushim, v'hu What is Sefer Adrushim? Refers to Eitz Chaim. Who be Eitz Chaim Shar Mem Zayin Perek Hey. He doesn't tell us exactly what it says there, so I'll look it up later and I'll share with you what I find. Okay, but he's tell us to look there. Probably is a more elaborate, maybe more details on this concept of the male and female, of the hidden and the revealed. Because of Eitz and the Rebbe Rashab continues. He's going to cite another point that is brought there. He also writes there, because of Eid, another point that he writes there, Ki abriya liyesa stuma, Bria being that it's sealed, stuma means sasam, closed up. Like we just said, it's concealed. Nikra cheshech, v'hi gerua min ha-Yetzirah. It's inferior to Yetzirah in that sense. Gerua is a very strong word. Gerua means that it's inferior. That's exactly what the word means. It's less than. Min ha-Yetzirah ha-magula ha-nikra eir. So being that it's closed and sealed, so it's called darkness, and it's in a lower level, it's gerua, it's inferior to Yetzirah, which is revealed and called light. So though Yetzirah is a lower level, but in a certain way, it's superior to the concealed level of Beriyah. Next page, 1389. Ubezayar Truma. So the Rebbe Rashab is grounding this. He's now quoting a Zayar. So far we quoted a pre-Eitz Chaim and citing also the Eitz Chaim. An additional point, this point he just made, that is Gerua from Beriyah, is Gerua, is a lower, so-called inferior to Yetzirah. B'Zayar Truma, the Zayar Pasha Truma, Daf Kufnan Hey Amud Aleph, page 155a. Al Posuk, there he explains the verse. The verse says, Ulekfedi, and for my honor, Barasav Yitzativ Afasisiv. I created, I shaped, and I also made. So you have here Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. All the Kfedi. Barasav is Beriyah, Yitzartov is Yetzirah, shaping, and Asiyah is the full final product. As we know, Beriyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah, 3 steps in the process of creation. Beriyah is like the outline, the raw material. We're going to learn about it in the next paragraph more in detail. Yetzirah means shape. It's not just a piece of clay, you're shaping it. And Asiyah is when it's the final product. So we know when God created the universe, it says that he created everything in one, like in one nucleus, in one one nebulous entity, and then he began to so-called shape it into the details each day, the creation of that day. So the Zohar on this pasuk says the following. The Zohar says the koi al kovet tata. What does kfedi mean? My honor, my kovet. It's referring to the lower level of kovet, b'chinas malchus, shemistaken al yidei ha'adam. This is the kovet level of malchus. This kovet law, which usually refers to bina. That's an honor, dignity of God that comes from above. But kovet tata is a level of malchus shemistaken al yidei adam, that is built and generated. You could even say beautified, because mistaken also comes from the word tikkun, tikkunim as in ornaments. But bottom line, it comes through the human being. When we honor God, so it's not God's honor on his own. We're showing and expressing and honoring God. So he says, this is l'kfaydi. That is the human being honoring the divine. For Emesham. And he says there in the Zohar, Kegavna, the Kovedilah, the Tikkun Azlin Bei Beriyah, the Soter Smola. That corresponding. Just a moment. Yeah. That corresponding to the Kovedilah, to the higher level of honor, the Tikkun Azlin Bei So Beriyah is directed, is facing and being drawn the Sata Smaller to the left side. Yetzirah biyamina. and Yetzirah to the right side. That's what it says in the Zohar. Like we say, Yetzer Eir. So Yetzer is Eir, which is the right side. Ubeida Cheshach is the left side. Ki Eiru Chesed, because Eir is the level of Chesed, which is Gilui. Like it says, God saw the light Ki Tov, and it was good. Tov is Chesed, it's a revealed state. The Cheshach B'chin is Gvura. And darkness, concealment, is the level of Gvura. That's why we find by Yitzchak, Lechein, by Yitzchak, who is Gvura, Avram is Chesed, Yitzchak is Gvura. What do we say? Nemer v'tche'ena einov mireyes. His eyes were darkened from seeing. He was blind. Because Yitzchak Gvura is a concealed state. So that's why Yitzchak could not see. Referring to this concealment. So what do we know from the Zohar? So the Zohar is confirming, or not confirming, the Zohar is saying similar to what it said in the Pri Eitz Chaim, that these two levels of Beriyah and Yetzirah is to the left. Beriyah is to the Gvura to the left, which is Cheshach, and Yetzirah is to the right, which is Chesed, revelation. Why he's bringing Kovid, I'm not sure. Why is Malchus relevant here? I guess the reason is because it's talking about the Aveda from below. So Beriyah, the Aveda of Beriyah is going to the left side, and the Yetzirah is going to the right side. Yeah. But the Zohar is not finished. Asiyah be'emtziyosa. And the world of Asiyah, so Beriyah is to the left, Yetzirah is to the right, and Asiyah, remember, there's also Asiyah, the world of Asiyah, Asisiv, that's in the middle. Kamei Damar, or Kamei Damrinan, Ani Hashem Eiseh Kol. I, God, created Kol, refers to like Tiferes, the third level, the middle one, the middle path. Uksiv Eiseh Shalom. Again, you see the word Eiseh, Hashem Eiseh Kol. The word Asiyah is being used both in the context of Kol, which refers to this middle level, that encompasses both, and Shalom. Shalom, we know, is also the third level, because the right and left are two different, like so-called positions, and the third reconciles and creates peace between them. And the Zohar concludes, Va'aldo, baroshev yisativ afasisiv kitikuni ilah. And that's what the verse is saying, for my honor, in order to build Malchus, and that it should correspond and relate and reflect the higher level of covet of God's honor. That's why I created, I shaped, and I also built Vasisiv Kitikuni law. Kitikuni law most likely means for the higher tikkun, for the higher repair and building of God's honor. So you need all three: Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, Gvura, Chesed, and Tiferes. Doesn't say the word Tiferes, he says Amtzeisa, the middle. So left, right, and the middle. And why does it begin with Beriyah? Because first begins the concealed state, the revealed state, and then the combination of both through Asiyah. And now he brings from a commentary on the Zohar, and the fact that the Zohar says Yetzirah is connected to light, Beriyah Cheshach, and Beriyah to darkness, Hevi b'Migdash Melach. The Migdash Melach is a commentary on the Zohar, Mashakosa b'Pri Eitz Chaim Hanal. The Migdash Melach quotes the Pri Eitz Chaim that was cited at the bottom of last page, Ki abriya liyesa stuma hi garua ma Yetzirah magula. Because Beriyah, being that it's closed, it's concealed, is Garua, is inferior, is less than Yetzirah, which is revealed. So here we see that a lower level of revelation has a quality that supersedes or is more powerful than the concealment of a higher level.
Just the opposite of what we said before.
Opposite of what we said. Why is it opposite?
Because we said before that we were talking that Nukba was higher than...
and it's still higher. Beriyah is still higher than Yetzirah. But revelation has a power that compared to revelation, concealment has something. Each one has something that the other doesn't have.
It's like Matthias and Mahus, the same argument. I got you.
Exactly, like Chacham and a Navi. The Navi sees clearly, so you have clarity of a prophet. The Chacham sees farther, but it's not clarity of like a prophet. It's not like seeing it; it's concealed. Like Matthias and Mahus, exactly right. Well, if you want, you could share this with your spouses, and come away with understanding that the feminine mystique is not as revealed, but it's coming from a deeper, darker, from a place that's concealed. And revelation has its quality that he's describing here. Look, he wants to say there's a quality in revelation because we are ultimately explaining that Mishnah is higher than Talmud in some ways. And yet the Talmud could access a deeper place, as we said. And we're going to learn this, we'll learn about it more. But now, let me stop here and see if anybody has any questions before we continue. Okay?
Yes, Rabbi, I didn't understand when it said there that Tikkuna Ilah, and the different, the earlier one was Tikkuna Tata. So, what is that? What's the difference here? You said Tikkuna Ilah generally refers to Bina.
I said Kavod Ilah refers to Bina.
Oh, I thought Tikkuna. Okay.
Well, I have to look at inside the Zohar, but what it seems to me is, remember, the verse says, for my honor, Lukvaydi, I created, I shaped, and I built, which is the three worlds. So he says this Kavod is talking Kavod Tata, Malchus Shemistaken Aidei Adam. Remember, Malchus, as opposed to the higher levels of the spheres, is like the moon that's diminished. And we have to be the ones that build Malchus, Binyan HaMalchus, Tikkun HaMalchus. Malchus is always the place, the area that we are working on. So Malchus is the Kavod. Through us serving God and elevating Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, we honor God and we build the Kavod Tata of Malchus. Now, what are we doing? We're elevating the Kavod Tata of Malchus to Kavod Ilah. That's what he says. Kagavna the Kavod Ilah, the Tikkun Azlan Bey. Again, I want to look it up inside to make sure that I got every detail, but that's the general picture. So now, what is the Baros of Yitzhak Avasi? So this is the Avodah that we do, like Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim, the three kavim, right? Torah is in the middle, Avodah is the left, Tefillah, and Gemilas Chasadim is Chesed. He doesn't say Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim. He says that our work through Beriyah, which is on the left, to the left side, Gvura, concealed, and Yetzirah, Chesed on the right side, and Asiyah in the middle, like it is, we're elevating the world to align it to the Tikkun Ilah, which I'm assuming means the way it is in the highest levels. So you're elevating Malchus, you're elevating the worlds to Malchus that elevates it ultimately all aligned with Tikkun Ilah, which is most likely the higher levels of Tikkun, but go to the higher levels of Atzilus and beyond. But again, I want to look at it inside, but that's what it looks like, it sounds like to me, is what he's saying. But the main focus here is to establish that Beriyah and Yetzirah are concealed and revealed, Gvura and Chesed. What he said earlier, Nukva and Char, feminine and masculine. Doesn't bring that here right now, but that was the idea that we learned here. So it's all establishing the point that he wanted to make earlier about Yetzirah and Beriyah Cheshach. Now, for the record, we're going to be going now for quite a few pages. I'll tell you exactly how many. Till page 1398, 9 more pages. We're going to elaborate on this difference between Beriyah and Yetzirah. 9 pages. So it's actually a total of 10 pages. That's how much discussion we're going to go through on this topic. So you can rest assured that the Rebbe Rashab is going to reveal a lot more here and explain a lot more as we develop this concept. And how I understand it in the context of the interface of Ayin Beis, yeah, he's showing us how Beriyah Yetzirah play a critical role, and they're going to correspond to Talmud and Mishnah, with Mishnah being more revealed, meaning the clarity of Mishnah, Talmud being the revelation that comes through concealment. But we'll see how he goes with that. Okay, any other questions before I continue reading?
I have a question. I'm afraid it's very far afield, but it's just on my mind. When we talk about the Shekhinah dwelling here in this lowest world, we think of it as the sort of feminine aspect of Elokus, and I don't know, Shem Havai or Elokim, Shem Havai. I don't know. Just it's a feminine aspect. You think it's more concealed, like you say here, Borei Choshech, and yet that's. I mean, I know these are completely different contexts in which references to God are made, so it's seemingly completely unrelated. But I thought I would ask anyways.
But I'm not clear. You're saying to me that it says somewhere that the feminine, the Malchus, is more revealed?
Well, yeah, they say, like in the Beis Hamikdash, it said the Shekhinah rested, like over the Mishkan with the clouds and their revelation and with the Ketores, and I mean all the activity in this world that we read about in Nigla, it seems to be the Shekhinah, which is a feminine aspect of godliness, and so that's revealed here. But yet you're saying here over on this side, the Nukvin is Beriyah, which is Choshech. So I'm just saying it seems inconsistent. That's all.
Well, first of all, Malchus, on one hand, is the last of the 10 spheres, and it does draw down godliness into the next world. So that's why Malchus is always like the Shechina, Shechenes mislabeshes, v'shakanti b'seicham. But at the same time, we also say Malchus has no light of its own. Leslam megamah klum. It has nothing of its own, like the moon that needs the sun in order to reveal. So you can ask the same question there. Which one is it?
Yeah,
Malchus,
exactly.
And the answer is
Nukvin and it's darkness. Yeah, exactly.
The answer is both. Like the concealment of Malchus is what allows a higher level of energy to go into the next level. That's exactly why Beriyah comes before Yetzirah, which means first the level is concealed, like I said, and then it gets revealed. So the answer is, at the end of the day, even when we talk about the feminine energy, a mother, there's a part of the mother that's a mystique and hidden, but then there's the mother as she relates to her children, and she does sustain and nurture and so on. So the answer is Malchus has both dimensions. The focus here is on the element of the Keva as in Beriyah, as in concealed, and then there's the level how Malchus also extends itself and reveals something. But even when it reveals, Malchus is revealing a very little amount. That's why Malchus it doesn't reveal like Chagas. If you talk about the Midas of Atzilus, Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, there you have full-blown attributes and faculties. Malchus, is only the outer extreme. That's why you say someone's a melech. You don't know much about the personality of the king. You just know he's the king and the leader of the nation. So that's a concept in Chassidus that Malchus does indeed have a dual properties. Part of it is concealed, part of it is revealed. We also learned before, if you may recall, that Malchus has two elements, that's a Zocher and a Keva within it as well. Like he said, what was the expression he said? A medes la'ad. I have to find it. That the Malchus goes into Biyah, it's a mashpia. When Malchus is in Atzilus, it's a makabel. And there you have there as well, that Malchus, in the state of makabel is what we're talking is concealed. In the state of mashpia, Malchus is revealing. Not of its own, from a higher level, but it reveals. That's just briefly, not really relevant to this discussion here, but Malchus does have both properties as well.
Great, thank you.
Look, even when we're coming to Talmud, we said it begins with darkness, But then when the sages begin to learn and develop the Talmud, there's a lot of revelation there. It's not like there's only darkness. It initially is darkness. Then when you start studying the Talmud, it reveals a level of Chabad, that's even higher than the level of Mishnah, like we said, even higher than the levels of Atzilus, all the way to Ayin of Kesser. But that's through the work we do. Initially, it's a state of concealment. Okay. So let's continue, unless there are other questions. So the new paragraph on page 1389. It says like this now. Va'inyan hu, the inyan of this is, al pi ma shekosev b'makam acher, based on what is written elsewhere, she has gimel madreges Chomer Tzureh v'Tikkun. Okay. Now, if you remember, if those of you that learn Ayin Beis, we learned together Ayin Beis in volume 1, Chomer Tzureh Tikkun goes back a long way, close to the beginning. Well, the first 50 pages, I believe, in Ayin Beis, Chomer Tzureh v'Tikkun. So let me explain what those words mean. It's essentially a 3-step process of creation. I mentioned earlier, Beriyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah is Chomer Tzureh v'Tikkun. So you take, let's say, a piece of clay, a raw, unshaped piece of clay, and you want to shape it into an ornament, or into a vessel, or to something designed. The same can be applied to any metal or any element. So the first stage is Chomer. It's raw matter, unshaped. The second is Tzureh. You start creating shapes in it. And Tikkun refers to the final product. Why is it called Tikkun? Tikkun doesn't only mean repair. Tikkun means also beautiful. Tikkunin comes from the word ornaments, as I mentioned. So it also means repair, but it also means Tikkun means a complete, full entity. So you'll see this. You'll see any craftsman will do those 3 things. The first thing is the raw material, shaping it, and then the finishing touches, and you have the final product. And that's Chomer Tzureh Tikkun, the way God created existence. Not that he had to create it that way, but he wanted to create it in an orderly, organized way, so we can understand how he creates and also retrace the steps. And Beriyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah is generally those 3 steps, Chomer Tzureh and Tikkun. In case you want to look up, there we call that Kunakud Sfira Patzif, I think it was. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Nakud Kaf Shatach. Okay. I don't see it quickly. I'll look it up and I'll share with you where this was discussed. So now he's going to use this to understand what we're learning here about Beriyah and Yetzirah. Okay. Upirush Chomer hu hisavus etzem hadavar. What's the meaning of the word Chomer? Chomer means raw, actually, raw matter. It's the creation of the very essence of the object. It's still shapeless. The Ayin Beis shum tzura, and it doesn't have any shape in it, and any form. V'hu Chomer hayuli. This is what's referred to in the Ramban in different places. Chomer hayuli, which means the potential archetype or the potential raw state. Shepashet mekol tzura. That's unshaped from all forms and all details. So the Rebbe Rashab is now going to introduce a topic which is broad Chassidus and about the Daled Yesodis, like right at the end of chapter 1 in Tanya, that they're the 4 elements of Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofer. Now we know these are 4 archetypes: fire, wind or air, water, and earth. And then there's the Yesod, what he's going to call, I think he's going to call it Daled Yesodis, Chomer hayuli. Yeah. So firstly, these 4 archetypes are like 4 character traits, if you wish. And they are all rooted, and they all begin in an unshaped way, and then they begin to take shape and form as they develop and evolve. You say this, like the four elements, they first were created, Chomer Poshet. One Chomer Poshet, one what's the word, pile of clay, or one pile of one entity, Chomer Poshet, a shapeless entity. U'kamesha kosav Rambam b'Perek Gimel. Mehilchus Yisei Teira Halacha Yud, like the Rambam writes in the third chapter of the Halacha Hilchus Yisei Teira, the Mishnah Torah, chapter 10. I'm sorry, Halacha 10. V'zel Shene. This is the exact quote from the Rambam, Maimonides. Bora hakela mato megalgal hayereach goylam echod. So there he talks about the galgalim, the way Torah astronomy, at least as was understood, consisted of galgalim, that there were 9 spheres. And one of them is called the Galgal HaYereach, the sphere where the moon resides. So he said below that Galgal, God created Goylam Echad. Goylam again means like a, we say the Goylam of the Maral Miprag is just a shapeless entity. Goylam. It's another word like when you say Chomer Poshet. Goylam Echad, one so-called raw matter, Ubara Arbet Sudas L'Goylam Zeh, and created 4 different so-called shapes or forms to this Goylam. This raw, shapeless piece of matter, in it he shaped it into 4 different shapes. It would turn into 4 shapes. Just like when we take a piece of clay and then you shape it. Very similar to what we say how God shaped the human being. Vayikach Hashem, God took Offer min Adama. He took clump of earth from the ground and then shaped it into a human being and then instilled in it a soul. Okay, this is the Rambam. The Kosav HaRamban, Ramban in the beginning of Bereshis, Nachmanides writes, in Parsha Bereshis he writes, this Avos Chomer Heyuli Nikra Beriyah. That's what the word Bereshis bara means, bara. The creation of a Chomer Yuli, of a shapeless piece of matter. Why is that called creation? Because once you already shape it, that's already taking the raw matter and turning it into details. But what is the real chiddush? The chiddush is first creating a piece of clay, a piece of raw matter. So that's the ikar ischachus hayisavus. The main novelty of creation is that first raw matter, what he calls Chomer Heyuli. And afterwards, what he enclosed, Tzureh, a shape and form to this Chomer. In other words, he applied shape and form to this, and shaped and formed this raw matter. The Hein Tzureh, how you say this? Those are the shape of the 4 elements. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofar. That's the acronym. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, of fire, air, water, earth. Zeh b'chinas Yetzirah. So Beriyah is the Chomer, the raw matter, and Yetzirah is once it's being shaped into specific forms. These 4 forms called Eish, Ruach, Mayim, of fire, air, water, and land, and earth. Sorry. That's Beriyah and Yetzirah. What about Asiyah? Asiyah b'chinas Tikkun. Asiyah is the third. Chomer Tzureh Tikkun. That's the level of Tikkun. What does that mean? U'kamoiva osasot siparnel. Hargam unkelis v'taknis. So in the pasuk in Kiseitsev, it says the word v'osasot siparnel. What does that mean? That he did her nails. So the Targum explains that the osasa comes from the word tikkun, the taknis. Which is a form of shaping it into a final beautiful product. So when you say someone does their nails, like polish their nails, or you get a manicure the nails, that's the word asiyah. So asiyah doesn't just mean to build or to do, like usually we say Also, you did something, is Asiyah. Asiyah also means to polish it, to refine it, to manicure it. V'hainu, what does that mean? This means the gamla achar shenasis atzura lachemer, that even after you have applied shape and form to the raw matter, oid tzorech l'sakna, you still need to finalize it, so to speak. You still need to polish it, to finish it. Or like we say, we finish it. V'zeu gemar malachta. And that's the end of the work done. Gemar malachta, that's the final step in the work done in creation. So like you'll see, after, let's say, a sculptor sculpts an object out of raw clay, you'll see they'll come back and do the final touches, get rid of a little excess here, polish it, finish it to the point that it's a finished product. So you have Chomer, Tzureh, Tikkun, Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. And that's how God created existence to let it make sense. Of course, God could have created the last step and doesn't need, God is not a sculptor, he's not an artist, he doesn't need to go through these steps. But he wanted to make it in a way that makes sense to the world, that the way the logic and the intelligence that God created, that it should make sense step by step. So it's Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. Okay, clear. I think that's clear. Any questions on this? He's now going to explain this. And now I see where he's going. Aha, so he's going to explain, talk about interface. That it begins from a very shapeless place, to shape to a final product. Don't try to figure out how this works with Mishnah, with Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud, because I can't figure it out at this point. So I think we have to wait with that. You know, how that works exactly. That Talmud is like the raw matter, and Mishnah is like the shape, and Mikra would be, Asiyah would be the final product. It seems like the other direction, but
exactly.
Right. So I'm just saying that I have it in mind, and we'll get to it when he gets to it. Right now, I can't tell you how that works with what he's saying right now. So here we have to absorb before we process. Okay.
Rabbi Jacobson.
Yeah.
You know, you always talk about the interface, right? You always say that there is one, and then there's the second, and then in the middle there's the connector that has a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? But
Correct.
This clearly, obviously talks about, you know, when we talk about these levels, Mishnah is definitely the interface between Talmud and Mikra. So on one hand, it has obviously qualities of Mikra, and then on the other hand, has the qualities that are expressed in the Talmud. So in that regard, we could probably understand it a little bit, no?
Maybe, but I'm not. I don't want to speculate now, because this is you have to still develop that. So I just pointed it out. It may be. I'm not denying what you're saying is possible, but we have to. I would wait to see how this is explained. Then we can perhaps apply that to Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud.
It's a very dense 10 lines, boy.
Yeah. Because the problem would be, if you go with that approach, what are we talking? We start with Talmud, we learn Talmud, the Mishnah gives it shape and form, and the Mikra finishes the product. Is that how we would say it? Maybe a Malmata L'mayla. Maybe from the bottom up it works that way. I don't know. I'd rather not speculate on this. There's too many inconsistencies at this point to really apply it. Let's just continue learning. It's all right. I have patience. I think it will become obvious once we understand what the Rebbe Rashab wants to say. Let's see how he's going to explain this. So let's read a little more. He says, "Inyan hu." What is the inyan in this? How do you explain this? The Isavas Yesh, hu be'efen kazeh, the creation of the Yesh. And remember, the definition of Yesh is the identity of existence, an identity, a Yesh. When you talk about Ayin, you're talking about lack of identity, meaning it's completely sublimated and absorbed by godliness and that which is higher than it. Yesh is a definition of a creation of an entity. So he says, so Isavas Hayesh, who be'efen kazeh, the manner in which it's created, she'ein nasa mitchilu b'chinas yesh mamish. In other words, you don't have a final product immediately. It develops, it has to get to that stage. So it doesn't begin, again, she'ein nasa mitchilu, in the beginning, it's not a yesh mamish, not a final yesh, a total defined entity. The first step is a shapeless piece of matter. And this is what's called potential existence. Now, obviously, in the example with clay, it doesn't work. It's not efsharius hametzias. It is a piece of clay that you're shaping. But in Beriyah, efsharius hametzias means that the raw clay is still not defined what it's going to look like. Is it going to look like a plate? Is it going to be a cup? Or is it going to be an image of a bird? For all you know. So from that point of view, it's still efsharius hametzias, means it's still in a potential state. So it's only efsharius hametzias, lo b'chinas metzias mamish. You can't yet call it a defined entity. You could say there's a chomer, there's matter, there's something there, but you cannot call it metzias mamish. V'zeu b'chinas haberiyah. So in the physical world, it would be like a raw piece of clay or a raw piece of matter. You know, similar to what the scientists talk about the Big Bang, that before the Big Bang, everything was like in a nucleus or one cell of a conception of a child. It's all concentrated in one seed. It doesn't yet have shape and form. So that's called what he calls the Chomer Yesh. But that's physical. In the spiritual world's Beriyah, there it's not even a physical entity. It's just God has said, I am ready to create now. So there's like a conceptual, shapeless, I don't want to even call it matter. I would just call it an entity that's not atzilus, that's not purely divine. It has its own personality, but it's still not shaped. So that's the world of Beriyah. Afterwards, this gets shaped in form and shape. This now turns it into a shaped entity. But it's only in a general form. You don't yet see all the details. Now you could ask 1 second, doesn't sort of sound like you are seeing the details, and it's Tikkun that just polishes it, like I said, finishes it. But apparently he's saying now that Tzureh is that you're getting some shape, but it's not every detail. That's how he's explaining it. And I see now comes a parenthesis, which is not a short parenthesis. Okay, so I'm not going to do the parentheses right now because it's pretty long. I will do the line right after the parentheses, which is, parentheses is at least 15 lines. Let's see, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Exactly 15 lines. So after the parentheses, 7 lines from the bottom, he says, why is that the case? Since it's coming from a state of the divine that's beyond any type of independent entity, so the process of how it evolves from godliness into Metzias is a gradual process. The higher the level, the closer it is to Ayin. That's why it's a Chomer Pashut. Doesn't have any shape. Then when it goes into Yetzirah, it gets shape. It still doesn't have every detail because it's still closer. In other words, Chomer Pashut is closer to the divine than the final product. So it still carries that type of shapelessness that comes from the divine energy. It's almost like when you have an idea before you formulate it into words and composed language, the idea is still in a type of amorphous, nebulous state. And then as you develop it, it starts getting some words and then more words until you finally present something in a speech or in a book or in an article. So the closer it is to the source, the more shapeless it is, more closer to Ayin. And that's the reason it goes through these steps. So why did God make it this way? I mentioned before, because he wanted it to be organized, so structured, but it's much deeper than that. He wants that there should be, in the higher levels of existence, there should always be a connection to something that is more shapeless. Remember, I gave the example that I heard when I was in yeshiva. Why did God make it that plants don't just grow? Why a child doesn't just born? Because he wanted to give us a sense of how things evolve and originate first from a state of ayin before it becomes a yesh. So we should have the capacity to understand the bridge between the godly energy and the physical matter. So it's not a leap, it's not a quantum leap, even though there is a quantum leap, we're going to learn about it. But there's also, even when the yesh is created, it still has in it elements that are shapeless, that remind us of the connection it has to its source, because it hasn't been shaped yet. So it's actually a beautiful way of understanding the divine, even in existence, because when you trace any creation, it'll always originate in a very pure, a concentrated form, which is much closer to the ayin, to the so-called, I don't want to call it nothingness, to this so-called non-substance of existence before it became substance. And then it evolves, just like you would say that first it's a gas, then when you cool it, it becomes a liquid, water, and then when you freeze it, it becomes ice. So gas is its most ethereal state. Water is already a liquid state, and solid is the most tangible state, most concrete state. So the same thing is God created everything in that way, that when you go to the highest levels, it's still in a state which is between yesh and ayin, until the yesh begins to shape, and ultimately Tikkun gets the full-bodied reality of Asiyah. That's essentially what he's saying right now. But we still have to go back to the parentheses, and there's more to come as well. But I'm going to stop here, and we have a sense of Chomer, Tzureh, Tikkun, which is going to come back to explain Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, which then will take us back to, okay, yeah. So, any questions? Okay, I'm going to stop here.
Can you compare this whole thing to the history of the world, starting with creation, and then finally the ultimate Tikkun when we prepare the world for Mashiach?
Well, that would be more, the world was first more materialistic, and we refined it. It became more spiritual, more refined. Here, it seems like it begins in a more refined state, meaning more ethereal, and then it becomes more matter and Asiyah. What you're talking is mamata l'mayla. From the bottom up, we take a very materialistic, hostile, and coarse universe, and we refine it through our work and through our avodah, through our service, and we trace it back from Asiyah to Yetzirah to Beriyah to Atzilus, what you're describing. Here he's talking about the process from the top down of creation. That's how I would contrast it. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. As I said, we still have to